The rain had not stopped falling over Brooklyn, New York for 3 days straight. Streets shimmered with broken reflections of neon lights, the city alive but merciless. Addison Martinez clutched the soaked umbrella tighter in her hand, her shoes pressing against puddles like the entire world had turned into one endless gray ocean. She was only 24, and yet grief had already carved a permanent hollow in her heart. Her father, the man who raised her with warmth and dignity despite their modest life, was gone, not because of the cancer itself, but because of the merciless decision of Health Corp Insurance, the largest healthcare company in America. They had denied his medication, stripping away his last chance at comfort. Addison had watched the strongest man she knew slip into despair, until one night, unable to endure the pain he had taken his own life. Every time she closed her eyes, she still saw his trembling hand on hers, his whisper before he left, "Lives stronger than me. Addison, don't let the world crush you." But the world already had. And now, standing in front of the towering black glass building in downtown Manhattan, Addison made a decision that would forever change her life. The building did not belong to Health Corp. It belonged to someone far more dangerous. The name carved into the marble at the entrance read, Jones Enterprises. Rumors whispered across the city about Robert Jones. Some called him a billionaire investor with too many enemies. Others claimed he was the youngest mafia boss in Chicago, ruling an empire of shadows stretching from New York to Los Angeles. No one dared to publicly say his name, not if they valued their life. Addison, however, had nothing left to lose. She stepped into the lobby, heart pounding like a frantic drum, and approached the front desk. I need to see Mr. Jones." The receptionist's smile froze. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But it's urgent, life or death." The woman's polished nails tapped against the desk. Before Addison could lose her courage, 2 men in black suits appeared, their movements sharp, trained. Without a word, they guided her to the private elevator. Addison's breath caught. Was this really happening? When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she entered a room of glass walls and stormy skies. A grand piano stood near the window, and next to it, seated with an unreadable expression, was the man she had come to see. He was younger than she expected, barely 30. Tall, sharp features, dark blonde hair, swept carelessly back, and eyes like ice blue-gray piercing, as if he could strip the truth straight from her soul. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He studied her, deciding whether she was worth the breath of acknowledgement. Finally, his voice, smooth yet cold, filled the room. "You don't belong here. Why are you in my office?" Addison's throat tightened. She forced herself not to tremble. "Because you're the only one who can give me justice." She told him everything. The betrayal of Health Corp, her father's death, the CEO who had laughed in her face when she begged for help. Every word trembled with both pain and rage. By the time she finished, tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. Robert leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. "And what exactly do you want from me, Miss Martinez?" "I want you to kill him," she said, voice steady, despite her racing pulse. "Kill Richard Thompson, CEO of Health Corp." Silence stretched like a blade between them. Then, to her shock, Robert laughed softly, a sound that was neither cruel nor kind, but chilling in its certainty. "Do you know how many people walk through these doors asking me to kill someone? But you—" He tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle. "You're different. You're not trembling like prey. You're standing here like a woman who has already lost everything." "I have," Addison whispered. Robert rose from his chair, moving closer. His presence was overwhelming, every step drawing her into his orbit. He stopped just inches from her, his voice dropping lower. "I'll kill him for you. But nothing in this world comes free. Her breath caught. I don't have much. I can give you all my savings, $10,000. It's not. He cut her off with a faint smile. Do you think a man like Richard Thompson is worth $10,000? No, Miss Martinez. What I want is something far more valuable. Her stomach nodded. I don't have anything else. Robert's eyes darkened as they swept over her, yet not with lust, but with a strange, unreadable weight. Then he said it. You. I want you. Addison froze. You mean, not your body? Robert interrupted sharply, as if the thought offended him. Not unless you choose it. What I want is your time, your presence. Be my wife for 90 days. She stared at him, stunned. Wife. He nodded once. A contract marriage. You'll wear the ring, live under my roof, and accompany me everywhere. In return, I'll handle your revenge personally. 90 days. After that. His eyes flickered something heavy, almost sad, clouding their depths. After that, you'll be free. Addison's heart raced. The deal was madness. Who in their right mind would agree to marry a mafia boss? But then she thought of her father's hollow eyes in his last days, of Richard Thompson's mocking smile, of the injustice that had burned her soul raw. And she realized madness was the only path left. I don't even know you, she whispered. Robert's lips curved, not in humor, but in something dangerously close to a challenge. Then spend the next 90 days learning from me. If you survive, you'll walk away with justice money and your life intact. And if I don't survive, his gaze turned to steel, then you'll still have lived more than most people ever do. Robert reached into a drawer and placed a velvet box on the desk. Inside lay a diamond ring, simple yet breathtaking. He slid it across the surface toward her. Think carefully, Addison Martinez. Once you put this on, there's no going back. You'll belong to me for 90 days. And in my world, belonging to me means protection, but also danger beyond anything you've known. Addison's trembling fingers hovered over the ring. Every instinct screamed at her to run. And yet somewhere deep inside, another voice whispered that this was fate. With a shaky breath, she picked up the ring and slid it onto her finger. When she looked up, Robert's expression had softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. Welcome to the Jones family, Mrs. Jones. The title struck her like a thunderclap. She wasn't sure if it was fear, exhilaration, or something far more dangerous that coursed through her veins. But in that moment, one thing became certain: her life was no longer hers. As Robert turned back toward the window, the city sprawled beneath them like a kingdom waiting for its king's command. His hand absently touched his chest, just above where Addison could not see the silent reminder of the diagnosis he carried alone. 90 days. 90 days. To kill, to love, to live. And as Addison stood in the storm of his world, she had no idea that her heart had already stepped onto a path where love and death would walk hand in hand. The first morning, Addison woke up in the Jones mansion on the outskirts of Chicago. She wondered if she was still dreaming. The room was larger than her entire Brooklyn apartment, its windows opening to acres of manicured gardens and an endless horizon. The sheets smelled faintly of cedar and smoke, a scent that seemed to follow Robert wherever he went. Yet the reality pressed down on her. This wasn't a fairy tale. She wasn't here because of love or choice. She was here because of a deal: 90 days of being Robert Jones's bride. The ring on her finger glinted in the sunlight, heavy with meaning she hadn't fully grasped yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, whispering to herself, "What have I done?" Before she could sink further into doubt, the door opened silently. Robert stepped in his suit, immaculate, a glass of black coffee in his hand. "You're awake." His tone was calm, as though he had expected her to be. "Come downstairs when you're ready. Breakfast is served at 8. Don't be late." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Addison in a daze. He hadn't touched her, hadn't demanded anything. He had spoken like a man issuing commands to someone who now belonged to his world. The dining hall looked like something from a movie, crystal chandeliers, a mahogany table long enough to seat 20 people. Robert sat at the head, skimming through a newspaper, his expression carved from marble. Addison sat a few seats away, unsure of the appropriate distance for whatever they were. He lowered the paper, his blue-gray eyes catching hers. "Sit closer. A wife doesn't belong at the far end of the table." Her heart stumbled as she obeyed, sliding into the seat beside him. The smell of his cologne mingled with roasted coffee and buttered toast, grounding her in this surreal moment. "You're too quiet," Robert observed after a few bites. "Are you regretting the ring already?" Addison stiffened. "I'm just trying to understand the rules." "There's only one," he replied, sipping his coffee. "When I tell you to stay close, you stay close. When I ask you to leave, you leave. Do that, and you'll survive these 90 days. She swallowed hard. "And if I want more than survival?" For the briefest second, his hand stilled the mask of indifference, cracking, to reveal something more profound, something haunted. But just as quickly, it was gone. "You'll learn soon enough," he said, folding the newspaper. "Finish your breakfast. I have something to show you." By noon, Addison stood before a modest, suburban house in Los Angeles. She hadn't set foot here since her father's funeral. "Why are we here?" she asked, as Robert's car pulled up the driveway. Robert answered simply, "Because the people inside this house think they can break you. I don't tolerate anyone hurting what's mine." The word "mine" set her pulse racing, not out of affection, but out of the sheer weight of possession it carried. Robert pushed open the door without knocking. Inside, Linda Addison's stepmother was lounging on the couch with a glass of wine. Carl, her stepfather, flipped through TV channels with greasy fingers. "Suppose it isn't the orphan girl," Linda sneered, rising with false sweetness. "What brings you crawling back here? Did you finally run out of rent money?" Addison clenched her fists, fighting the sting in her chest. "This is still my father's house. You had no right to throw me out." Linda laughed coldly. "Your father left me everything. That makes it my house, and Carl's, of course." Carl smirked, his eyes roaming Addison in a way that made her skin crawl. Maybe she returned because she realized she's worth more on camera than in real life. "What do you think, Linda? A few videos online, and she'd finally start paying rent." Addison's stomach turned. She opened her mouth to fight back, but Robert's voice cut through the room like a blade before a single word escaped. "Touch her, and you die." The silence that followed was suffocating. Linda's eyes widened as she took in Robert's presence, the sharp suit, the aura of danger that filled the room. Who are you?" Robert stepped closer, his hand brushing Addison's shoulder possessively. Her husband. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his words. Carl's smirk faltered, but bravado clung to him like cheap cologne. "Husband or not, this is none of your business. The girl owes us." He didn't finish the sentence. Robert moved faster than Addison could process, one hand slamming Carl against the wall, his forearm pressed to the man's throat. "You think you can extort her, use her? She's under my name now. Every insult and bruise you've ever given her is a debt you owe me." Carl's face turned red as he choked for breath. Robert leaned in, his voice low and lethal. "Do you know what happens to men who owe me?" Linda screamed, rushing forward, but one look from Robert froze her. Addison stood trembling, torn between fear and an overwhelming, dangerous sense of safety. For the first time since her father's death, Someone was fighting for her, not with desperate words, but with unyielding power. "Robert," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Stop, please." At the sound of her plea, his grip loosened. Carl collapsed to the floor, coughing violently. Robert adjusted his cufflinks as though nothing had happened. "You're lucky," he told Carl coldly. "My wife asked me to spare you. Don't mistake mercy for weakness." He turned to Addison, his gaze softening ever so slightly. "Let's go." The car ride back to Chicago was silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Addison sat with her hands in her lap, staring at the faint tremor in her fingers. Finally she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." Robert's eyes stayed on the road. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He exhaled slowly, his voice quieter now. "Because you're wearing my ring. And in my world, that means you're untouchable." Her chest ached at the conviction in his tone. It was terrifying, yet it was the first time she felt shielded instead of exposed. But beneath that shield lay a storm she didn't yet understand. That evening, Robert led her into a dimly lit room in a mansion. At the center stood the same grand piano she had noticed on the first day. "Play," he instructed, sitting down in a chair across from her. Addison blinked. "What? You told me music is what you have to offer. So play." Her throat tightened. She hadn't touched a piano since her father's funeral. Music had been their bond. His hands guiding hers over the keys when she was a little girl. His laughter when she made mistakes playing now felt like opening an old wound. But Robert's gaze left no room for refusal. With trembling hands, she pressed the first key. The note rang out shaky and uneven. Then another and another, until the melody of Clair de Lune filled the room. As the music unfolded, something inside her cracked open. Grief poured through her fingers, each note a confession she hadn't dared to speak. Tears streaked her cheeks by the time the final chord lingered in the air. Robert said nothing, but when she looked up, she saw his jaw tight. His eyes darkened not with coldness, but with something she couldn't name. "You're more precious than you think, Addison," he murmured finally. "And in these 90 days, I intend to prove it." Later that night, when Addison finally slept, Robert stood by the window staring at the Chicago skyline. He pressed a hand to his chest again, the dull ache beneath his ribs, a constant reminder of the countdown ticking away. 90 days. He had promised her safety, but how long could he protect her when death itself was already closing in? His gaze drifted to the piano room where the echo of her melody still lingered. A faint smile touched his lips. "She thinks I saved her," he whispered to himself. "But maybe she's the one saving me." The evening sky over Washington, D.C., bled into shades of crimson and indigo, the monuments glowing faintly against the twilight. Addison sat in the back of Robert's car, her hands clenched in her lap, staring at the city she had only seen once before on a school trip. Back then, the streets had felt grand and full of promise. Now they felt like corridors leading straight to hell. Beside her, Robert was silent. His face was unreadable, sculpted in cold determination as the car glided past government buildings and luxury hotels. "Why here?" she asked softly, unable to bear the silence any longer. "Because Richard Thompson thinks Washington makes him untouchable," Robert replied without looking at her. "But the higher a man climbs, the harder he falls." Addison swallowed hard. She wanted justice for her father, but the reality of bloodshed was pressing in. And after tonight, Robert's gaze flicked to her, his voice softer, though no less firm. "After tonight, you'll see what justice costs." The car stopped near the glittering facade of a high-rise hotel. Thompson was scheduled to attend a gala fundraiser, a perfect opportunity for Robert to strike. Inside the suite, overlooking the venue, Robert adjusted his cufflinks, then holstered a sleek pistol. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as though each gesture had been practiced 1,000 times. Addison watched her pulse racing. "You're really going to do it yourself?" Robert turned his eyes sharp. "A leader who hides behind others doesn't deserve loyalty. If I promise justice, I deliver it with my own hands." The words sent a shiver through her, not only fear, but something dangerously close to admiration. He crossed the room, pausing before her. "Stay here. Please don't open the door for anyone but me. What if you don't come back?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. A faint smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Then you'll know I kept my promise." And just like that, he was gone. Minutes stretched into hours. Addison paced the suite, each clock tick louder than the last. She replayed her father's face in her mind, the nights of pain, the injustice that had driven her here. This was what she wanted. Yet why did it feel like she was trading one nightmare for another? A sudden noise, a gunshot, faint but undeniable, echoed from below. Addison froze, her breath caught in her throat. Then silence. She rushed to the window, her heart hammering. Down on the street, chaos was unfolding. People screamed, scattering like ants. A black car peeled away from the curb, tires screeching. Before she could think, the suite door burst open. Robert stumbled inside his suit jacket, torn blood seeping through his shirt near his shoulder. Addison gasped. "Robert." He pressed a hand to his wound, wincing. "Not a word. Just help me." She guided him to this couch, her hands trembling as she tried to peel away the blood-soaked fabric. The sight of the bullet graze made her stomach twist, but she forced herself to stay steady. "You need a hospital," she whispered urgently. "No hospitals," Robert growled. "Too many eyes. They'd know I was here." Her frustration boiled over. "You're bleeding. You think pride is more important than your life?" His gaze locked onto hers, fierce even through the pain. "This isn't about pride. It's about survival. In my world, weakness is fatal." Tears burned her eyes. She hated him for his stubbornness, for dragging her into this. But she hated even more the thought of losing him now. She ripped a strip of fabric from her dress, pressing it against the wound to slow the bleeding. He hissed, his jaw tightening, but didn't pull away. "You're reckless," she muttered through clenched teeth. "You could have sent someone else, and let them fail." His lips curved faintly. "No, justice had to come from me for you." The words struck her like a blade and a bomb all at once. Hours later, after the bleeding had slowed, and the adrenaline had ebbed, Robert leaned back, pale but steady. Addison sat beside him. Exhaustion etched into her face. "You should hate me," he murmured, his voice low. "You asked for revenge, and I gave it. But now his blood is on your hands too." She looked at him, her heart twisting. "I don't hate you. I hate the world that forced me to ask." For the first time, something raw flickered in his eyes. Not power, not control, just weariness, like a man carrying too many ghosts. "You're not like them," she whispered. "You could have walked away. Why didn't you?" Robert turned his face toward the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Because time is short, and if I only have 90 days left, I'd rather spend them doing something that matters." The confession hit her like thunder. 90 days. The words he had repeated before, but now they carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Her lips parted. 90 days. "What do you mean?" But he didn't answer. His silence was louder than any truth. As dawn broke, Robert stood painting the sky in shades of gold and gray, his posture composed despite the pain. "Pack your things," he said. "We leave for Chicago within the hour." Addison frowned. "What about your wound?" "I'll live." His tone was sharp, but the glance he cast her softened the edges. Please, don't make me regret sparing your stepfamily. I need you to be strong, not worrying over me." She stepped closer, surprising even herself with the boldness. "I can't help it. You risked everything for me. That makes your life mine too." For the briefest second, his mask faltered. His eyes searched hers as though trying to decide if she was strong enough to know the truth. Then he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then, promise me something, Addison. If I don't survive these 90 days, don't waste your life on revenge. Live. Live harder than your father did. That will be enough." Her breath caught. The distance between them seemed to vanish, every word threading an invisible bond tighter around her heart. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She held his gaze silently, swearing she would never let him go without a fight. On the flight back to Chicago, Addison watched Robert sleep, his head tilted back, his features finally at rest. The bandage she had wrapped around his shoulder peeked from beneath his shirt, a reminder of the price already paid. Justice had been served. Richard Thompson was dead, but justice was never free. Addison's heart knew it now. She hadn't just asked for revenge. She had bound herself to a man walking a razor's edge between life and death. And the 90 days ticked louder in the shadows with every passing hour. Chicago's skyline glittered like 1,000 sharp blades under the night sky. The Jones mansion was alive with quiet movement guards, shifting cars, arriving voices murmuring in the grand hall. Addison had grown used to her room's silence, the piano's haunting melody that soothed her restless thoughts. But tonight, the silence was gone. A meeting was underway, one that Robert insisted she attend. He told her, "You're my wife," before leaving her side briefly. "If they see you, they'll understand what that means." But as she stepped into the hall, Addison realized that being seen was more dangerous than invisible. Dozens of men turned to look at her, their gazes sharp, curious, suspicious. She felt like a lamb walking into a den of wolves. At the head of the long table, Robert sat with the same composure that unsettled and fascinated her. His injured shoulder was hidden beneath his tailored suit, but she could feel the strain in the way he leaned ever so slightly to one side. When his eyes met hers, the room seemed to still. He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit here." She obeyed, her pulse loud in her ears. One of the men, tall, broad-shouldered with scars etched across his cheek, leaned forward. His voice rumbled through the hall. "Boss, with respect. Who is she?" His eyes flicked to Addison, disdain barely concealed. "You bring in a stranger, call her wife. That makes her our weakness." The word weakness sliced through Addison's chest. She opened her mouth to respond, but Robert beat her to it. "Her name is Addison Jones," Robert said evenly, "and no one questions her place here." The scarred man scowled. "Forgive me, but the family has rules. Trust must be earned. How can we know she won't betray us?" Robert's gaze turned to steel. "Because she belongs to me, and if you don't trust her, you don't trust me." A dangerous silence followed. Addison sat frozen, torn between gratitude and the crushing weight of being used to prove Robert's authority. That was when the doors opened and she walked in. Carrie King. Addison had never seen a woman like her, tall, striking, with dark waves of hair and eyes that glittered like polished obsidian. She wore a fitted leather jacket over a crimson blouse, her presence commanding instant attention. "Sorry I'm late," Carrie said, her lips curving in a smile that was more a weapon than a greeting. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Robert first. "Boss." Then they slid to Addison. And this must be the famous wife. The way she said wife was laced with mockery. Addison's stomach tightened, but she forced herself not to flinch. Robert's expression didn't change. "Carrie, sit down." Carrie obeyed, but her gaze lingered on Addison sharp and assessing like a predator sizing up competition. Later, after the meeting ended and the hall emptied, Addison lingered near the piano room. She needed the quiet, needed something familiar. Her fingers brushed the keys, though no sound followed. "You play beautifully," a voice drawled behind her. Addison turned. Carrie leaned against the doorway. Arms crossed, a sly smile playing at her lips. "I heard you played for him." Carrie continued, stepping closer. "That's cute. But let me give you some advice. Music won't keep you alive here." Addison straightened, summoning courage she didn't know she had. "I didn't ask for this life, but I won't let anyone tell me I don't belong." Carrie laughed softly. "You think belonging to him makes you safe? It doesn't. It makes you a target. And when he's gone, because men like Robert don't live long, you'll be nothing but a memory." The words stung, but Addison refused to look away. "Then I'll make sure I'm a memory worth keeping." For a moment, Carrie's smile faltered, replaced by something colder. Then she turned her heels, clicking against the marble floor. "We'll see," she murmured before disappearing into the shadows. That night, Robert returned to find Addison still at the piano, her fingers pressing soft chords into the silence. "You shouldn't let her get under your skin," he said quietly. Addison looked up. "Carrie, she doesn't think I belong here." Robert moved closer, his presence heavy but not unwelcome. "Carrie is useful, loyal at least to the family. But she's not me, and only I decide who belongs." His words should have comforted her, but they made her heart ache. "You put me in front of all those men today. You used me to prove your authority." Robert's eyes softened. He sat beside her, the faint scent of smoke and cedar enveloping her once more. "I didn't use you. I protected you. In this world, appearances matter. When they see you beside me, they think twice before testing you." "But what about testing you?" Addison whispered. "What if I make you weaker?" Robert's hand brushed hers, steady and warm. "You're not my weakness, Addison. You're the only reason I fight harder." Her chest tightened, her pulse unsteady. For a moment, she wanted to believe him completely. 2 nights later, the threat became real. Addison was walking through the mansion's corridor when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found herself face to face with the scarred man from the meeting. "You don't belong here," he growled, advancing. "You blind the boss, but the rest of us see the truth. You're a liability." Fear surged through her, but she stood her ground. "If you touch me, he'll kill me." The man smirked. "Maybe. But he won't always be here to protect you." His hand shot out, grabbing her arm. Before Addison could scream, a gun clicked behind them. "Let her go!" Robert's voice was ice. He stood at the end of the corridor, gun raised, eyes blazing. The man froze, his grip loosening. Robert stepped closer, each stride radiating fury. "Did you forget my words? She is untouchable. Touch her again, and you won't live long enough to regret it." The scarred man dropped to his knees, stammering apologies. Robert didn't lower the gun until Addison whispered, "Please, don't." Only then did he relent, holstering the weapon. He turned to Addison, his expression unreadable, but his hand found hers, holding tight as he led her away. Back in her room, Addison sat on the edge of the bed, still trembling. Robert stood near the window, his posture rigid. "You should leave," he said suddenly. Her head snapped up. "What?" "You should leave this mansion, this life. It's too dangerous." His jaw tightened. "I could protect you, but today proved me wrong." Addison rose, her voice unsteady but firm. "And where would I go? Back to the people who wanted to exploit me. Back to a life with no justice, no safety." Robert's eyes locked on hers, storm and vulnerability warring within them. You don't understand, he murmured. I'm not afraid of what they'll do to you. I'm so scared of what I'll become if they do. The honesty in his voice shook her more than any threat could. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his. Then, don't push me away. If I have 90 days with you, I'd rather face danger than run from it. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Robert lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her skin soft, reverent, almost desperate. Careful, Addison, he whispered. You're making it impossible to let you go. The next day, Addison walked into the hall again, with her head higher and her steps steady. The men watched, some with suspicion, others with reluctant respect. And from the corner, Carrie King smiled a slow, dangerous smile that promised the battle had only begun. Enjoy your place beside him, Carrie murmured loud enough for Addison to hear, because I'll be beside him in the end. Addison didn't flinch. For the first time, she met Carrie's eyes without fear. We'll see. The war had started not just for survival, but for Robert's heart. The invitation had arrived wrapped in velvet and sealed with crimson wax. Its weight was symbolic, not just paper, but a test. Robert had accepted without hesitation. We're going to Miami, he told Addison as casually as if announcing a dinner reservation. Addison blinked. Miami. A birthday party, he explained. Carrie's father. A gathering of the families. The way he said it made clear this wasn't a simple celebration. It was a battlefield disguised as luxury. Addison's chest tightened. And you want me there? Robert's gaze softened briefly. You're my wife. Where I go, you go. The words should have comforted her, but instead they echoed like a vow she wasn't sure she was ready to bear. The mansion overlooking Biscayne Bay glittered like a palace. Chandeliers blazed through towering windows, and a symphony of strings floated into the humid night. Dozens of luxury cars lined the driveway, guarded by men in dark suits with earpieces, every family represented, every rival watching. Addison adjusted the silk gown Robert had chosen for her, a deep sapphire that clung to her curves and shimmered under the lights. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but when Robert offered his arm, the steadiness of his presence anchored her. Head high, he murmured as they entered, "Never let them see fear." The hall turned to look. Conversations paused. Addison felt the weight of every gaze, some curious, some mocking, others downright hostile. She was not mafia blood, not trained, not one of them. And yet here she stood, wearing the ring of Robert Jones. The music faltered when Carrie King appeared. Draped in scarlet, her confidence radiated like fire. She easily cut through the crowd, her smile sharp as a blade. "Boss," she greeted, Robert's voice dripping with charm. Then her eyes slid to Addison. "And Mrs. Jones." The title rolled off her tongue with deliberate scorn. Addison braced herself. "Lovely dress." Carrie continued, circling like a predator. "However, it does look borrowed. Doesn't it, gentlemen?" Laughter rippled from a few corners. Heat flushed Addison's cheeks, but she held her ground. "It's not the dress that matters. It's the woman wearing it." The remark earned murmurs, some amused, others approving. Carrie's smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Clever tongue. But words mean little here. This is a world of action, Mrs. Jones, and action is what separates us." Her eyes gleamed. "Shall we prove it?" Addison frowned. "Prove?" What? Carrie lifted her glass, her voice loud enough for the room to hear. "That only one kind of woman can stand beside a mafia boss, one who fights, bleeds, and survives. Not some fragile outsider clinging to his name." A hush fell over the hall. All eyes turned to Addison. Robert's jaw tightened, but before he could intervene, Addison spoke. "And what do you suggest?" Carrie's smile widened, triumphant a duel. Gasps echoed. Mafia duels weren't games, they were tests of skill and dignity. Addison's heart pounded. She had never fired a gun until Robert's brief lesson in Chicago. Yet she heard herself say, steady and clear, "I accept." Robert rounded on her when they were alone in a side chamber. His eyes blazed with fury. "Are you insane? You could be killed." Addison lifted her chin, even as fear gnawed at her insides. "She humiliated me. Humiliated you. If I walk away, I prove her right that I don't belong." Robert's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Belonging isn't worth dying for." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but resolute. "Maybe not, but dignity is. And I won't let anyone reduce me to a shadow beside you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. Then Robert cupped her face, his touch both furious and tender. "You're going to get yourself killed, Addison." Her lips curved faintly. "Then teach me to survive." In a quiet garden outside the hall, Robert handed her a pistol. The weight shocked her. It was heavier than she imagined, colder, more final. "Breathe," he instructed, standing behind her, guiding her hands. "The gun is an extension of you. Don't fight it. Command it." His voice was steady, low against her ear. His chest pressed lightly against her back, steadying her trembling form. "Focus," he murmured. "The world narrows down to you, the weapon and the target. Nothing else exists." She pulled the trigger. The recoil jolted her arms, the shot wide. Frustration welled in her throat, but Robert's hands steadied hers. Again. Another shot. Closer this time. Again. The third struck near the center of the target. Addison gasped, disbelief flooding her veins. Robert's lips brushed against her temple, so fleeting, she wondered if she imagined it. Good girl. Back inside the hall had been cleared. At one end stood Carrie, her posture confident, pistol gleaming. Addison's palms are damp, but her head is high at the other. 3 shots each, the referee announced, highest total wins. Carrie went first. Bang. 9 points. The crowd murmured. Bang. 8 points. Murmurs grew louder. Bang. 10 points. Applause erupted, 27 in total. Addison's stomach clenched. She needed near perfection. Robert's gaze locked on hers from across the room. He didn't speak, but his eyes told her everything. Trust yourself. Addison raised the pistol. Her hands trembled, but then she remembered Robert's voice, his breath against her ear, his steadying touch. Bang. 7 points. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Bang. 9 points. The whispers sharpened surprised doubt. She had 1 shot left. To win, she needed a perfect 10. The hall was silent. She inhaled, steady. Imagined Robert's hands guiding hers. Imagined her father's face, the dignity she was fighting for. Bang! The bullet struck dead center. 10. The hall erupted in disbelief. Addison lowered the pistol. Her breath ragged, her eyes locked on Carrie. 30 points, the referee declared. The winner, Mrs. Jones. The crowd buzzed with astonishment. Some clapped, others muttered darkly, but none could deny what they had seen. Addison had done the impossible. Carrie's face twisted with rage, but she forced a brittle smile. Beginner's luck. Addison met her gaze evenly. No, it was dignity. Robert stepped forward, his hand finding Addison's, squeezing firmly. Pride gleamed in his eyes, though his voice was calm as ever. My wife doesn't need luck. The hall bowed to the truth. Addison Martinez was no longer just a contract bride. She had earned her place, if only for this night. Later, in the quiet of their suite, Addison removed her gown, her body still trembling from adrenaline. Robert stood by the window, glass of whiskey in hand, watching the waves crash against the shore. "You were reckless," he said finally, his voice rough. "I was brave," she countered softly. He turned, his eyes burning with something rawer than anger, fear, desire, pride, all tangled into one. "You don't understand. Every moment you stood there, I thought I'd lose you." Addison stepped closer, her voice low. "And yet you didn't. I'm still here with you." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then Robert's restraint broke. He pulled her into his arms, his lips crashing against hers in a kiss that was less about passion than survival, a desperate, consuming promise. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Addison," he whispered, voice hoarse, "don't ever make me watch you risk your life again." Her hand cupped his cheek, tender, despite the storm inside her. "Then, don't make me fight alone." Outside the waves roared, but inside the suite, another tide had risen. Neither could resist. The neon lights of Las Vegas stretched endlessly, dazzling and dangerous, a city built on illusions. To Addison, it felt like walking into a stage play where every smile hid a blade. Robert's hand rested lightly on her lower back as they entered the luxury boutique inside the Bellagio. The place shimmered with gold chandeliers and velvet displays guarded by men who pretended to be attendants but carried the unmistakable tension of mafiosi. "Stay close," Robert murmured. His voice was low, yet protective, as though he already sensed the storm waiting behind polished glass. Addison nodded, her sapphire dress gliding as she walked beside him. She reminded herself to keep her chin high. She wasn't just Addison Martinez anymore. She was Mrs. Jones, at least for now. The boutique was nearly empty, except for one woman waiting near the counter. Carrie King. She turned with a smile far too sweet to be sincere. Dressed in ivory silk, diamonds glittering at her throat, she looked every inch the mafia princess. Her eyes locked on Addison like a predator finding its prey. "Well, if it isn't Robert and his little wife," Carrie said smoothly. "What a coincidence." Robert's jaw tightened, but his tone remained neutral. "Carrie." Addison forced herself to meet Carrie's gaze. "We're here to shop." Carrie's laugh was soft-cutting. "Then shop. Just be careful. Things in this store are very precious. And sometimes they go missing." Addison's stomach clenched. She didn't yet understand, but she could feel the weight of the snare tightening. Moments later, the trap snapped shut. A saleswoman rushed forward, pale and nervous. "Mr. Jones, I'm so sorry, but one of our rings is missing." The diamond piece was reserved for Miss King. The room stilled. Carrie's eyes widened in mock horror. "Missing? Surely not. Unless—" She turned to Addison, her expression feigning sympathy. "You were awfully close to the counter, weren't you?" Gasps echoed. Two guards stepped forward, their hands hovering near their weapons. Addison froze, heat flooding her cheeks. "I didn't touch anything." Carrie's voice sliced through hers, dripping with venom wrapped in velvet. "Let's check. After all, theft is such a lowly crime, not fitting for the wife of a boss." The boutique doors were locked. Attendants and guards circled, whispers thick in the air. Addison stood trapped in the center, every eye on her. Robert's expression was unreadable, but his stillness radiated danger. Carrie stepped closer, tilting her head. "If she's innocent, she has nothing to hide. Why don't we search her?" Addison's breath caught. "You can't. You have no right." "On the contrary," Carrie purred. "This is mafia territory. Rights are given, not assumed. So, Robert, will you protect your wife, or let us prove she's a thief?" The words were a dagger. Addison's chest tightened. This wasn't about the ring. It was about loyalty. Robert was being forced to declare where he stood. The silence stretched unbearable. Then Robert moved. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "If anyone lays a hand on her," he said, his voice cold steel, "I'll burn this boutique to the ground." The crowd murmured, but Carrie only smiled wider, as if she had expected this. "Then you'd prefer to search her yourself? After all, if she's truly innocent, what harm could it do?" Robert's gaze flicked to Addison. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the fury at being cornered, the desire to shield her, and the dangerous necessity of proving her innocence before the watching families. "Come," he said softly, guiding her toward a side chamber. Once the door closed, Addison turned on him, her voice trembling with anger and shame. "You don't believe them, do you?" Robert's eyes darkened. "I believe you. But belief won't silence them. Proof will." Her throat tightened. "And you're going to search me?" His jaw clenched. "If I don't, they will. And I'll kill anyone who touches you." The words were brutal, but beneath them lay something raw. When they reached for hers, his hands trembled faintly, not with desire, but restraint. "Trust me," he whispered. Addison's heart pounded as his fingers lightly brushed her sleeve's waist and skirt. His touch was clinical, careful though. Every graze lit her nerves. When he reached the end, he stepped back, his voice steady. "Nothing. She's clean." Robert opened the door, leading Addison back into the hall. His hand remained on hers, his grip unyielding. "She has nothing," he declared, his voice carrying. The accusation was false. Carrie's brows arched, feigning innocence painting her face. How unfortunate. Perhaps the ring was misplaced after all. But before she could continue, a guard spoke. "Boss, the camera." The cameras were broken, and another was interrupted. Shattered glass bead on the floor. Deliberate. Robert's gaze snapped to Carrie, his smile razor sharp. Interesting. Almost as if someone wanted them off. Carrie's lips curved, but her eyes glittered with fury. "Are you accusing me?" Robert's voice was quiet, lethal. "I'm saying no one frames my wife and walks away unscathed." Addison's chest tightened at the word wife. For the first time, it didn't feel like a contract. It felt like a shield. Addison sank into a chair back at their suite, her hands trembling. The humiliation still clung to her skin. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I don't belong in your world. They'll always try to destroy me." Robert crouched before her, taking her hands into his. His touch was warm grounding. "You're wrong. You belong because I say you do. And tonight you showed them something they'll never admit. You're stronger than they think." Tears pricked her eyes. "I didn't feel strong." "You stood tall," he countered. "Even when they tried to break you, that's more strength than most men in that hall will ever know." For a long moment, silence stretched. Then Robert's hand rose, brushing a tear from her cheek. His eyes softened, the mask slipping to reveal the man beneath, the mafia boss. "Addison," he murmured, voice hoarse. "I swore I'd keep you safe. But what terrifies me is that you're the one keeping me alive." Her breath caught. She wanted to answer, but words failed. Instead, she leaned into his touch, closing the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like the desperate fire in Miami. This one was slow, lingering, a promise spoken without words. But not far away in the glittering halls of Las Vegas, Carrie King stood with a glass of champagne, her reflection gleaming in a fractured mirror. She remembered Robert's fury, the way he had shielded Addison, and bile rose in her throat. "Enjoy your victory," she whispered to the empty room, her smile sharp as glass, because the next game won't end in her favor. As dawn painted the desert sky in hues of rose and gold, Addison awoke to find Robert still awake, sitting near the window. His silhouette was outlined against the city's fading neon. his posture tense. "You should rest," she whispered. His eyes turned to hers, shadows etched in their depths. "I can't. Not when every move they make is aimed at you." Addison crossed the room, placing her hand over his. "Then let them aim. Because as long as you stand with me, I won't break." Robert's lips curved faintly, almost a smile, nearly surrender. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were the only truth in a world built on lies. And in that fragile dawn, for the first time, Addison believed she wasn't just surviving these 90 days, she was living them. The Chicago winter crept into the mansion like a silent intruder. Outside, snow blanketed the gardens, muffling the world into stillness. Inside, Addison sat by the fire, her hands pressed against her stomach, as if listening to a secret only her body knew. She had been restless for days, dizzy spells, nausea, fatigue. At first, she blamed the stress of Las Vegas and the tension of living under watchful eyes. But when the doctor Robert insisted she delivered the words, her world shifted. "You're pregnant, Mrs. Jones, a little over a month." Addison had frozen, the words echoing through her. Pregnant. Life blooming inside her at the very moment death circled her husband like a vulture. Sitting by the fire, she whispered the truth to the silence. "You're here. My father's gone, but you're here." Tears slipped down her cheeks. The thought of a child both terrified and healed her. But how could she tell Robert, a man counting down 90 days to his own end? That evening, Robert returned late. Snow clung to his coat, his expression carved in exhaustion. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his gaze distant. "You're quiet tonight," Addison said softly. "So are you." He studied her eyes, sharp. "Something's on your mind." She swallowed, debating whether to speak the truth. But his weariness stopped her. Instead, she asked, "Do you ever think about the future?" Robert's lips curved faintly, but without humor. "The future is a luxury I can't afford." Her chest ached at his words. He didn't know yet. He didn't see that the future was already growing inside her. 3 days later, the storm came. It began with rumors that Kerry King had resurfaced in Texas, rallying discontented allies. Robert dismissed most of them, but Addison saw the shadow in his eyes. "She won't stop," Addison said one night as they stood on the balcony. The city stretched beneath them, glittering cold. "Not until she destroys me." Robert's hand brushed hers. "Then she'll have to go through me first." The words were steady, but she could feel the steel coiling inside him. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was fighting for something he hadn't admitted yet. It happened in an instant. Addison had gone into the city with Mark Roberts' trusted bodyguard. They were supposed to be safe, just a short visit to the clinic for routine tests. But as they left, the black SUV stopped across the street. Men poured out, masked, armed. "Get down!" Mark shouted, shoving Addison behind him as bullets shattered glass. Panic roared through the air. Addison's heart thundered, her hands clutching her stomach instinctively. The only thought in her mind was the baby. Then she saw her. Kerry, standing across the street, coat billowing, her lips curved in a cold smile. "Bring her to me!" Kerry shouted. Addison froze, terror strangling her. She wasn't just a rival anymore. Kerry was a predator and Addison was prey. The chaos blurred gunfire screams, the screech of tires. And then suddenly, Robert was there. He appeared like a storm, stepping from his car, with a gun drawn, eyes blazing. His first shot dropped a masked man instantly. His second sent the others scattering. "Addison." His voice cut through the chaos. She stumbled toward him, tears streaking her face. He caught her, pulling her into his chest as his body shielded hers. She felt the thunder of his heart against her ear. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, sobbing. "The baby." The words slipped before she could stop them. Robert froze. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. His grip on her tightened. "Baby." But there was no time. Carrie's voice rang out again, furious. "Kill them both." Robert's jaw clenched. He kissed Addison's hair, his voice low but fierce. "Stay behind me. I'll end this." The firefight moved into the warehouse district. Robert led Addison into cover, his every movement precise, lethal. Mark flanked them, returning fire. And then Carrie emerged, unmasked, her pistol gleaming under the flickering light. "Robert," she called, her voice carrying across the chaos. "You're throwing away everything for her." Robert stepped forward, shielding Addison behind him. "I don't throw away. I protect what's mine." Carrie laughed bitterly. "Yours? She's weak, soft. She'll destroy you." Robert's voice was ice. "She's the only thing keeping me alive." The admission stunned even Addison. Her breath caught her hand pressing harder against her stomach. Carrie's eyes burned. "Then I'll kill her, and your unborn brat. Let's see how alive you feel then." Gunfire erupted. Robert fired back, his movement swift, but Carrie was a shadow slipping between cover, her rage fueling her precision. "Mark, get her out," Robert barked. Addison resisted. "No, I won't leave you." Robert grabbed her, his eyes fierce. "I'll find you. But if you die, I die. Go." Mark pulled her away, dragging her through the smoke. Addison looked back one last time, her heart ripping, as Robert stood against the storm, his figure blazing in defiance. Hours later, Addison sat in a safe house wrapped in a blanket. Her hands still trembled, her mind replaying every second. When Robert finally arrived, blood streaked his arm, but his eyes locked instantly on her. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "You're safe," he murmured, his voice raw. "Thank God you're safe." Addison buried her face against his chest, tears soaking his shirt. "I thought I lost you." His hand cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You'll never lose me, not while I have breath." And then softer the question she feared. "You said, baby." Her throat tightened. She nodded, whispering, "I'm pregnant." Robert's face was unreadable for a long moment. His eyes searched hers, storm and sunlight warring in their depths. Finally, he pulled her into his arms again, tighter than before. "A child." His voice was hushed, awed, our child. Addison's tears flowed freely. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid it would only make things more complicated." He kissed her hair, his hand splayed protectively over her stomach. "It makes everything more complicated, and it makes everything worth it." For the first time, Robert's voice broke. "I can't die now. Not when I have you and our child." Later that night, when the safe house was quiet and Mark kept watch outside, Robert lay beside Addison, his hand never leaving hers. "Carrie won't stop," Addison whispered. "No," Robert agreed, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, but his voice carried a new steel. "But neither will I. Not anymore." He turned to her, then his eyes burning with a promise that was no longer about contracts or 90 days. "You and our child are my future, and I'll fight every devil in this world to see it." Addison's heart swelled, fear and hope entwined. She pressed her lips to his, sealing the vow between them. Outside, the night was still, but inside something new had been born, a fragile hope, fierce enough to face even the deadliest rival. The Chicago mansion no longer felt safe. Guards doubled at every entrance, whispers of unrest, moving like smoke through the halls. Addison noticed the difference in Robert immediately. His calm composure hadn't cracked, but his eyes, those steel-gray eyes, carried a sharpness that hadn't been there before. He had always been dangerous. Now he was something else entirely. That evening, she found him in the study, the firelight casting jagged shadows across his face. Papers were strewn across the desk, maps, marked with red ink lists of names. "Another attack?" she asked quietly. Robert didn't look up. Not just another. Carrie had help from inside. Addison's stomach dropped. "Inside? Your family?" His jaw tightened. "One of mine betrayed me." The news rippled through Addison's chest like ice. She had seen enemies outside the gates, but betrayal within. That was a wound deeper than any bullet. Robert rose from his chair. His movements precise, controlled. In this world, loyalty is everything. Without it, there is no family. Only enemies wearing familiar faces. Addison hesitated. "What will you do when you find them?" He turned then, his gaze locking on hers. "What I must." She flinched at the cold certainty in his tone. For a moment, she saw not the man who had kissed her forehead in the quiet dawn, but the mafia boss feared across the nation. 2 nights later, Robert summoned his closest lieutenants to the mansion's great hall. Addison sat on the balcony above, hidden in shadow, though Robert knew she was there. The men stood in a circle, their faces hard, eyes darting with suspicion. At the center knelt a man, bound, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his lips split. Addison recognized him. Victor, one of Robert's oldest allies, a man who had dined at their table only weeks ago. Robert stood before him, calm as marble. "You sold us to Carrie," he said quietly. Victor spat blood, his voice trembling with defiance. "I did what I had to. She offered power. You're dying, Robert. Everyone knows it. I chose survival." The hall stilled. Addison's heart hammered in her chest. Dying. The word echoed, pressing against the secret Robert hadn't confessed to anyone else but her. Robert's voice dropped lower, colder. "You chose betrayal. And betrayal has only one price." Addison gripped the balcony rail, her knuckles white. She knew what was coming, but she couldn't look away. Robert drew his pistol, the gleam of steel catching firelight. "Any man who thinks loyalty optional, let Victor be your lesson." Victor's eyes widened, fear breaking through his bravado. "Robert, please." The gunshot cracked through the hall, final and merciless. Victor fell silent. The men around him bowed their heads, some in fear, others in grim acceptance. Robert holstered the gun with steady hands, his expression unchanged. But when he looked up, his eyes flicked briefly toward the balcony, toward Addison. And in that fleeting glance, she saw what none of the others could, the cost. Later, when the hall had emptied and the blood had been cleared away, Addison found Robert in the courtyard, cigarette smoke curling into the winter air. "You killed him," she whispered. Robert exhaled the smoke, mingling with his breath. "He betrayed me. He was your friend. He stopped being my friend the moment he put you and our child in danger." His voice cracked just slightly. "Would you rather I let him live? Let him betray me again?" Addison's throat tightened. She wanted to say yes, that mercy was worth the risk. But when she remembered the warehouse ambush, Carrie's voice promising to kill her unborn child, her protest died. She sank onto the bench beside him. "I don't want you to lose yourself." Robert's gaze softened, his hand brushing hers. "I already lost myself long ago. What I can't lose is you." He then pulled her into his arms, the cold night wrapping around them. His lips pressed against her hair, his voice low, almost broken. You saw tonight what it means to lead. Every choice costs a piece of me. But when I hold you, Addison, I remember there's something left worth saving. Her eyes filled with tears. She tilted her head, meeting his lips in a kiss that tasted of smoke, sorrow, desperation, and devotion. For a fleeting moment, the mafia boss vanished, leaving only the man who loved her. But peace was brief. News spread quickly through the underworld. Carrie had vanished from Texas, slipping through Robert's web of hunters. And with her disappearance came whispers of alliances of mercenaries bought with stolen fortune. She's planning something, Mark told Robert grimly one evening. Something bigger than before. Robert's hand tightened around his glass. Let her come. This time I'll end it. Addison shivered at the steel in his voice. She knew he meant it. And yet deep down, she feared what ending it might cost him. That night, as they lay in bed, Addison shifted closer, her hand resting on Robert's chest over the steady thrum of his heartbeat. Promise me something, she whispered. His eyes opened gray in the dim light. What? Promise me you'll live. For me. For the baby. Don't throw yourself into danger as if your life doesn't matter. Robert's hand covered hers, his touch warm, grounding. Addison, he murmured. I've lived my life like a man waiting for the end. But since you, I've wanted more. I promise I'll fight to live. Not just survive. Live. Her throat ached with tears. She pressed her forehead to his, their breaths mingling. Then I'll fight with you. In the dim light of dawn, Robert stood alone in the courtyard, snow falling softly around him. He drew a blade across his palm, letting the blood drip onto the stone. A silent oath. A vow that no betrayal, rival, or disease would take him from Addison and their child. From the balcony above, Addison watched her hand resting on her stomach. She didn't understand the words he whispered into the cold, but she felt them promises written in blood that bound them both to a future neither could see. And as the snow swallowed the traces of red, Addison knew one truth. Loving Robert Jones meant standing at the edge of darkness. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Winter in Chicago deepened, turning the city into a frozen kingdom. Fire roared in the hearth inside the mansion, but Addison still shivered. Not from the cold, never from that, but from the silence. Robert had been different for days. His strength had faltered, his steps slower, his face more drawn. He tried to hide it behind sharp suits and sharper words, but Addison saw what others didn't. His hand lingered at his side, the tremor when he thought no one was watching. That morning, she found him in the study, hunched over papers he didn't seem to see. The glass of whiskey on his desk stood untouched. Robert, she whispered, approaching cautiously. He looked up. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw exhaustion etched so deep it frightened her. Addison. His voice was low, rough. She reached for his hand. You can't keep doing this, pretending you're invincible. He pulled away gently, eyes shadowed. A king doesn't show weakness. Not to his men, not to his enemies. But I'm not your enemy, she said fiercely. I'm your wife, your child's mother. If you don't let me in, who will you have when the end comes? His gaze lingered on her, haunted. He didn't answer. That night, as they lay in the quiet of their room, Addison turned to him, her heart aching with words she could no longer hold back. You told me once that you had 90 days. That time was running out. But now, her voice broke. Robert, please, fight. Get the surgery. Do whatever it takes. Don't let this kill you. His arm tightened around her, his lips brushing her hair. Addison, you don't understand. In my world, men don't die in hospital beds. They die with guns in their hands. Her tears soaked into his shirt. And what about me? About our baby? Do we not matter? For the first time, his voice cracked. You're the only reason I'm still here. Addison clung to him, silent prayers rising in her chest. She would not let him surrender, not to fate, fear, or Carrie's shadow. Far away in a penthouse overlooking the neon sprawl of Dallas, Carrie King watched reports filter in. She had waited for this moment, biding her time as Robert weakened. His illness is spreading, her informant whispered. He won't last the month without surgery. Carrie's smile was sharp, venomous. Then we strike before he has the chance. A weakened king is easier to topple. Her glass of wine glimmered crimson under the light. Prepare the men. Tell them we aim for the queen. Break her, and he will crumble. It happened on a bitter night. Robert had finally agreed to dine with Addison in the private conservatory, a small escape from endless war. Candles flickered on the table, their flames reflected in Addison's eyes. For a fleeting moment, the world felt normal. Then the glass shattered. Gunfire tore through the conservatory. Guards shouted, bullets ricocheting off stone. Addison screamed as Robert pulled her down, his body shielding hers. Stay low, he barked, drawing his pistol with his free hand. His movements were swift, but Addison felt the tremor in him, the way pain lanced through his body as he returned fire. Robert, she cried, clutching his arm. He winced but didn't falter. I'll end this now. The ambush was brutal, but Robert was merciless. Despite his weakened state, he fought like a man possessed, every shot precise, every strike fueled by fury. Addison saw in him the ruthless mafia boss the world whispered about. Yet when his gaze flicked to her, there was nothing but raw fear of losing her. By the time the last gunman fell, silence returned. Smoke and blood lingered in the air. Robert's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temples. Addison crawled to him, her hands trembling. You're hurt. He collapsed against the wall, his shirt soaked in crimson. Not as badly as them. Her heart clenched. Stop pretending this is nothing. You'll die if you keep this up. His eyes locked on hers, fierce, even through the pain. Better me than you. Then Iyama. They managed to escape to a safe house outside the city. Addison tended his wounds there, her hands gentle, her tears silent. When she pressed fresh bandages to his side, he caught her wrist. His grip was weak, but his gaze burned. Addison, he rasped. Listen to me. If anything happens, don't you dare, she cut in, voice trembling. Don't you dare say goodbye. I have to, he insisted. The cancer, the enemies, it's all closing in. But you, his voice broke raw. You and our child are the only good things I've ever had. If I fall, promise me you'll protect the baby. Promise me you'll live. Her tears spilled freely. No, I won't promise that, because you're not going to fall. You'll fight. For us. For yourself. His forehead dropped against hers, desperate, trembling. You make me want to. God help me, you make me want to. The following night, Carrie struck again. A convoy of Robert's men was ambushed on the highway, their cars riddled with bullets. Survivors stumbled back with the same message: Carrie was no longer hiding. She was hunting. Robert's fury was volcanic. Despite his wound, despite the sickness tearing at him, he called for war. Tonight, he told his men, we end her. Addison stood at the edge of the room, fear clawing at her chest. She wanted to beg him not to go. But when she saw the fire in his eyes, she understood this wasn't just revenge. This was survival. The final confrontation unfolded in the skeletal remains of an abandoned factory on Chicago's South Side. Smoke curled from broken chimneys, the air heavy with the scent of rust and gunpowder. Carrie stood at the center, her red coat blazing against the shadows. "Robert," she called, her voice sharp, "the king who can barely stand. You should have stayed in your coffin." Robert's gun was steady, though. Addison saw the pallor beneath his resolve. "And you," he said coldly, "should have learned that betrayal is a death sentence." Gunfire erupted. Addison ducked behind cover, her heart in her throat. She watched Robert move like a predator, every shot claiming ground. But his strength faltered, his body betraying him. And then Carrie broke through the chaos, her pistol aimed not at Robert but at Addison. Time slowed. Addison froze as Carrie's smile curved, finger tightening on the trigger. "No!" Robert roared. He lunged, taking the bullet meant for Addison. The sound tore through the air, through Addison's soul. Robert collapsed into her arms, blood seeping hot and terrifying between her fingers. "Robert, please, no," she sobbed, clutching him. His eyes fluttered open, pain and love warring in them. "You're safe. That's all that matters." Carrie aimed again, but Mark's bullet found her first. She fell with a cry, her reign of terror ending in silence. Addison held Robert as the factory fell quiet, his blood staining her hands, her gown, her heart. "Stay with me," she begged. "Don't you dare leave me." His lips brushed her ear, faint trembling. 90 days. Maybe less. But every second with you worth it. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed her forehead to his. Then we'll make those seconds last forever. As sirens wailed in the distance and dawn broke over the city, Addison knew the truth. Time was no longer a number. It was a promise, fragile, desperate, but theirs, and she would not let it run out. Dawn spilled pale gold across the Chicago skyline, but inside the mansion silence reigned. Addison sat at Robert's bedside, her fingers entwined with his, counting every shallow breath he drew. The wound from Carrie's bullet had been dressed, yet it was not the gunfire alone that threatened him. Long hidden in shadows, his illness was finally clawing into the light. She whispered into the quiet, "You told me 90 days, but I refused to measure our love in numbers." Robert stirred, eyes half-open, gray as storm clouds. His lips curved faintly, a ghost of his old smirk. "You're stubborn, Mrs. Jones." Tears blurred her vision. "I'm your wife. It's my job." He chuckled softly, the sound raw and broken. "No. Your job is to let me go when the time comes." She shook her head fiercely. "My job is to fight for you when you can't fight for yourself." Later that day, the family doctor stood before them, his voice grim. "Without surgery, he won't survive the month. With it, he has a chance." Robert's gaze hardened. "Surgery means weakness. Means time away from the family. They'll circle like wolves." Addison rose to her feet, fury igniting her voice. "And dying makes you stronger. Robert, listen to yourself. You are not just a boss. You are my husband. You are this baby's father. If you walk away from surgery, you walk away from us." His eyes flickered, pain, fear, love tangled into one. "Addison." She grasped his face between her hands, her voice trembling but steady. "You told me once that I'm not your weakness. Prove it. Live. Live for me. Live for our child." The silence stretched heavy with the weight of choice. Then Robert closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that sounded almost like surrender. "Call the surgeon." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and nerves. Robert entered the operating theater like a warrior entering battle, though for the first time no gun was in his hand. Addison watched him through the glass, her heart shattering with every second. She pressed her palm against the barrier, whispering prayers she never thought she'd speak. Come back to me. Please, come back. Hours bled into eternity. The clock's hands crept forward, each tick a blade against her soul. At last the surgeon emerged, fatigue etched into his face. Addison's breath caught. Well, she demanded, voice breaking. A pause, then a faint smile. He made it. The surgery was a success. Addison's knees buckled as relief crashed through her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, unstoppable, as she whispered, "Thank you, God." When Robert finally opened his eyes, Addison was there, her fingers warm around his. "You should have seen me," she teased through tears, pacing the halls, threatening to break down the operating room door. His lips curved into a weak smile. "I'm sure you look terrifying." She laughed shakily, pressing her forehead to his. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." His hand rose trembling to rest on her stomach. "I couldn't leave you, either of you." Addison's tears fell anew, but they were laced with joy this time. "Then don't. Ever." Weeks passed. Robert grew stronger, his body mending under Addison's relentless care. The mansion, once heavy with tension, softened with new life. Guards smiled more readily. Music drifted from the piano room again, where Addison played, and Robert listened, his gaze never straying from her. One evening, as snowflakes drifted past the windows, Robert took her hand. Addison Martinez Jones. We began as a contract, a bargain made in shadows. But I want more. Her heart stopped. He knelt, producing a ring that gleamed brighter than the chandeliers above. "I want forever. Will you marry me, not as my 90-day bride, but as my wife in truth?" Tears spilled down Addison's cheeks. She laughed through her sobs. "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." The ceremony was small, hidden from prying eyes, yet no less radiant. Addison walked down the aisle in white silk, her belly beginning to show the promise of their child. Robert waited, his suit immaculate, but his eyes brighter than she had ever seen them. When he took her hands, his vows were simple, raw. "I was a man counting down his days. You gave me reasons to fight for tomorrow. You are my heart, my salvation, my forever." Addison's voice trembled as she answered, "You were once a shadow I feared. Now you are the light I choose. Whatever storms come, I will stand by you." Their kiss sealed not just a vow, but a destiny rewritten. Months later, the mansion echoed not with gunfire, but with laughter. Addison's piano filled the halls, joined by Robert's low hum as he carried their newborn daughter. The world outside remained dangerous shadows, lurking beyond the gates. But inside, love had carved out a sanctuary. Robert kissed Addison softly, whispering against her lips, "Forever." And Addison smiled, knowing they had already defied the clock. Their love was no longer measured in days, but in lifetimes. Their story ends here, but love like Robert and Addison's reminds us that every second matters, and every choice to fight for love is a choice to live. If this journey moved you, share it, tell it, let others feel it. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not about how long we live, but about who we choose to live for.